I'm Nigel. I've been struck, actually listening, I'm number 11 on now, so we've heard a few, how all of us, I think everybody else must be the same. There's a kind of link that you find to everybody. For me, wine, obviously, with Helen, we know each other well. Like Howard, I used to be a creative director. I'm actually known to cook dosa with my son on Sundays, so there's a weird one. Like Steve, I like baking. In fact, somewhere I've got a copy of Steve's book, and I believe it's the extremely rare unsigned edition. So I'm going to be putting a copy of that in trade me. I love Nick on milk. I get the milk thing because I'm English, and it took me a while to realise in New Zealand that chicken is something you find when you walk in an airport. You have to think about that, chicken. Okay. But this was the most intriguing link, just before I start. This week, 150 years ago, and it is this week, two guys, Hartley and Riley, walked into Dunedin with 87 pounds of gold that they found on the Clutha River and started the Central Otago Gold Rush. They found it just below my vineyard at Cornish Point. And when they found it, there was the most enormous rush of people in. And there were two guys, or a guy and a woman, John and Emma Marsh, who made the 200-mile walk across the Maniatoto to Cornish Point in that first rush. They had 3 children with them, 2 of whom were under 5. One was being breastfed, and she was 6 months pregnant with twins. And they walked 200 miles through complete wilderness. They made camp at the back of my vineyard, where she gave birth to the first 2 Europeans to be born in Central Otago. And getting to the point of this, great-great-granddaughter of one of those is Helen Clark. So, there you go. That's our last link. Okay, this is 6 minutes, 40 seconds on quantum mechanics. So, put one in the net. Hey, that's not my first visual, that's my second visual. What happened to my first visual? Okay, can we? Because that was visual number 2. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to run. Is the clock going? Yeah, no, that's the third visual. The first one was in the email to you. Okay. In which case, the first one I'll have to do to my name. The maths behind quantum mechanics and its insane predictions were sorted out 90 years ago. It made no sense then, and Niels Bohr, the father of the subject, doubted the human brain would ever be able to grasp it. We're not going to get into the detail in 6 minutes, but I want to raise one thing I think is strangest of all. When you throw a rock at an irritating item, in this case a cat, as we're talking quantum stuff, it follows a precise course, arriving at a definite point, normally on a painful part. But small particles don't work that way. When you send an electron on the same trip, the math says it doesn't take just one route. It actually seems to follow lots of different routes at the same time, all of which arrive at a single destination. Experiments back this weird idea up. A thing called the two-slit experiment was devised, and it clearly showed that electrons don't take a single path from A to B. Some 50 years later, an American physicist called Dick Feynman showed in fact the electron passes through every point in the universe when it crosses a room. He was a cool guy. He played the bongos in a pole dancing club in his spare time. So it's actually pretty neat when you have a Nobel Prize. When people asked him what on earth this meant, did the electron break into billions of bits? Did it fly frantically back and forth? How did it do it? He'd explained the electron didn't visit every point at all. Its probability did the visiting for it. Then the probabilities arrived back at a chosen destination, and they'd collapse back to recreate the electron and the single path that we perceived the electron actually took. So then they'd ask, what the hell is that supposed to mean? And he would reply, I haven't got a clue. He was honest as well as cool. His lectures, by the way, are on YouTube and really well worth seeing if you Google them. 40 years on from Feynman, we still don't have a better way to express it. Electronics prove it's true. Every time you turn on your phone or computer, scan goods at a checkout, load a DVD, or do any one of 1,000 things you take for granted every day, you require quantum mechanics to work. Lasers need it for them to laze. All modern electronics is based on the principles and mathematics of quantum mechanics. It's completely bonkers, it's balmy beyond belief, and yet utterly proven to be true. But can you envisage a world in which all the small stuff that exists can disappear into an infinite field of probabilities and possibilities, decide to zap round the universe on a sightseeing trip, and reassemble itself out of nowhere at a new place a couple of nanoseconds later? Honest? Of course you can't, and that's because you live in a world where your senses can't detect it happening. Ever since you were born, you've built up an idea of reality that you call common sense, based upon your senses, and those senses are inaccurate, unreliable, congenital liars. You live in a world of delusion, constructed by your brain to make up for the inadequacy of the signals your senses send to it. You're so used to it, you can't see the gaping canyons in your vision of reality. And anything that doesn't fit in that world of delusion that we call common sense just seems completely mad. Albert Einstein, a very clever man, had a great way of putting it. He said common sense was the amount of prejudice acquired by age 18. He had it nailed. Now, we're getting to the point of this. I want you to think about time and the way we perceive it. Of course, that doesn't mean to say it's the way it is. This is just the way we perceive it. It looks like this. We have a single point we call the present, moving steadily forwards. Behind it is a single trail, the thing we call the past. There's just one past. The past is fixed and unchangeable. But ahead of the present, there's an infinite number of possible futures. Some are more probable than others. So it's fairly likely I'll keep talking for 2 more minutes, though you may be hoping otherwise. Less probable I'll be interrupted by an earthquake, and at the other end of the spectrum, barely possible that John Peel arrived with a tax rebate. But as the present moves forwards, the infinite number of probable and possible futures are continually collapsing to form a single perceived actuality that we call the present. Does that sound familiar? It's not so weird this time, it's just that quantum mechanics works the same way that time works. So here's a question. What if time is symmetrical? What if, just as the future's made of infinite numbers of possible futures, the past is similarly made of infinite numbers of pasts? So, just as the future collapses to a single perceived present, the past collapses to a single perceived history. That's not so weird at all. It's just saying time works the same backwards as forwards. But that is how quantum mechanics appears to behave. So the problem may not be that it is bonkers, but we are blinkered. Your senses or your education have not equipped you to think about the past in the way you think about the future. Common sense ensures it never occurs to us that there are things that might be happening beyond the grasp of our common sense and our feeble senses. Physicists are now pretty sure there are indeed an infinite number of pasts. Whether they form an infinite set of alternative universes, or whether they cease to exist as they collapse, we don't know. Maybe we'll never know, but they're working on it. So, when you come across something that makes no sense at all, think about whether it is the problem or whether you are. There's another Nobel Prize winner, Daniel Kahneman, who summed it up perfectly. Our comforting conviction that the world makes sense rests on a very secure foundation, our almost unlimited ability to ignore our ignorance. Thank you.